We'll try again. Shalom uvracha, Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. With your permission, we'd like to study together the weekly section of Ha'azinu. I feel that it's very, very important to spend time studying this particular portion. This year, Ha'azinu follows immediately after 2 days of the celebration of the great holiday. And in some people's minds, because Ha'azinu in this year of 5771, we have the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Thursday and Friday. It can happen to certain individuals that maybe the emphasis of Parasha Ha'azinu is somehow belittled in their minds. So I would like to try to recommend, or perhaps even encourage people to spend time studying Parasha Ha'azinu, despite the fact that it comes after the 2 days of the holiday. And we review, each of us in his or her own way, we review the sections of Torah, and we shouldn't negate that practice.
As they say in the bad language, I think. Sheket b'vakasha. Hey!
We consider the background to be music rather than noise, and the difference between music and noise has to be clarified by people who have greater understanding of musical appreciation.
Okay, so you'll have to forgive me, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. In Parashat Ha'azinu, there's one verse at the beginning of the parasha. It's sentence 4, chapter 32, sentence 4. I'd like to focus our study this evening on that pasuk. Hatzur tamim pa'alo. Hatzur, the strong one, the rock, the strongest force in the world. Tamim pa'alo. God's deeds are perfect. Tamim. Kichal drachav mishpat. For all of God's ways are just. Kol drachav mishpat. Kel emunah ve'ein avel. God is a faithful God. God is a trustworthy God. And we were speaking before about different interpretations, what Kel emunah can mean. I heard the name of Rabbi Lam, Hashem bless him. He was quoting a midrash, Kel emunah, that maybe God had trust in us, based on Yahud Shemoni, Kel emunah, the God of emunah, the God of... Okay, maybe we could ask someone to please take the children out. Yeah. And not because we don't love them, we love them, but it could be that some of the people on YouTube would like to hear the words of Ha'azinu and are not yet on the level to understand the music. Okay. Can someone please do me a personal favor? Please? Could you please do me a favor?
Yes. We don't want the kitchen recording.
It's all a miracle that you have 14 children is a miracle too.
Every child in the world is a miracle. Kel emunah ve'ein avel. The God who is faithful. Ein avel. Avel. I guess maybe the word avel is connected to the English word evil, perhaps. Ein avel. God is never unfair. God is never false. It's always true. TZADDIK v'yasharu. God is tzaddik, God is righteous, and God is straight. Straight. God is forever moral, upright. Tzaddik v'yashar. So I would like to study together a teaching of the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was the spiritual head in Volozhin, of the yeshiva in Volozhin. In his case, it's commonly known as the Netziv's commentary on the Torah. It's called Ha'amek Davar, and he specifically discusses our text in his introduction to the Torah, in his introduction to the book of Genesis. It's something called Pticha l'Sefer Breshit. There's a Hakdama l'Sefer Breshit and a Pticha. I'm quoting from the Pticha l'Sefer Breshit, the introduction to the book of Genesis, wherein he discusses what's this double expression. Tzaddik v'yashar. What's the difference between tzaddik and yashar? And what practical difference is there to us if God is referred to only as a tzaddik or also as a tzaddik and a yashar. God is straightforward. God is moral. God is ethical. And he introduces us to the concept that in several places in rabbinic literature, the book of Genesis is referred to as the Sefer HaYashar, the straightforward book, the book of those who are straightforward. Why are they called Yashar? Because the main characters of the book of Bereshit, the leaders, the patriarchs, the matriarchs of our nation, were not merely tzaddikim. They weren't merely, like righteous in a spiritual way, but they were Yisharim, Yashar, tzaddik v'yasharu. Because we read about, let's say, Abraham's encounters with the non-Jewish world, and how sensitive he was to being honest, and how sensitive he was to being polite, and how he was respected. And the Netziv lists the activities of Yitzhak and the activities of Yaakov, that these people lived up to the divine, the imitatio Dei of tzaddik v'yashar. That God is not only interested in people being people being tzaddikim, but God wants us to also be yisharim. According to one reading, maybe Yisrael, Yashar El, which could mean, according to one Hasidic interpretation, Yashar El, they have a direct connection to God. Or Yashar El, maybe they are straightforward before God. One of the names of our nation is Yeshurun. Yeshurun from the word? Yashar, right? We emphasize this value of being Yesharim. And according to the Netziv here, he writes that the downfall of the Second Temple, the painful downfall and destruction of the Second Temple, stemmed from the fact that there were many people who were what he calls tzaddikim. They were very pious, but they were not Yesharim. And he says, "Uperashnu shahayu tzaddikim v'chasidim v'amalei Torah." Amalei Torah. They were very much involved in Torah study. They were very much involved in religiosity, in piety. Ach lo hayu yesharim b'halichot olamah. But in interpersonal levels of behavior, they were lacking. And since they were lacking, God, who is described in our Parasha, in Ha'azinu, as a tzaddik v'yashar, in a certain sense, this type of behavior was intolerable before God. Ach lo hayu yesharim. Al kain, he describes, because they suffered from a lack of yashar, therefore they had sinat chinam. Therefore they lacked a certain level of love and respect for each other. The Second Temple, as you know, was destroyed because of baseless hatred. And the Netziv writes that they used to label anyone who disagreed with them. Maybe I should read his language, not mine. He says, Al kain mipnei sinat chinam shebelibam zeh zeh chashidu et mi shera'u shenoheg shelo kedatam birat Hashem. If they saw someone who was different than themselves, someone who was following a different pathway, not their pathway, Shehu Tzedoki, Epikoros, they would immediately label them as they're no longer part of our group, because they didn't understand how to deal and how to love and how to appreciate other people. And this led to the destruction of the Second Temple. And that's why our verse is trying to explain why is it that the Second Temple was destroyed. It was destroyed because our God is a God who is tzaddik, but also yashar. And in the language of the Netziv, a very painful kind of language, he says, "Hakadosh Baruch Hu yasharu ve'eno sovel tzaddikim ka'elu." I don't know if anybody else would. Hakadosh Baruch Hu yasharu tzaddik v'yashar. Yashar. So even if you're a tzaddik, but you lack a certain level of yashar, of sensitivity to others, of love towards others, of tolerance of others, of appreciation of others, Eino sovel tzaddikim ka'elu. God refuses to accept. God refuses to tolerate such levels of tzaddikim. Now, I do think that even the Netziv would say there's a certain point where you can't go beyond that. There's a certain point where certain types of behavior, they undermine the very essence of Judaism, the very essence of the Jewish faith. That you can't say, well, okay, politically correct statements. Everybody's correct, and everything you say is fine. There is a certain red line, but I believe what he's saying is that as could happen. I mean, God forbid it, I'm sure it no longer happens, but in the past there were certain people who, if a person acted one level lower than themselves in religious practice, they thought this person was completely, irreligious. And if somebody acted one level above that which they were doing, they thought this person was a fanatic. And the only kind of behavior that's normal, the only kind of behavior that's proper is the way I do things. Only me. It begins and ends with my scope. Maybe TZADDIK v'yasharhu demands of us a certain level of behavior and understanding of other people. And we would hope that our study of Parasha Ha'azinu, which is read right at the beginning of the year, close to Rosh Hashanah, always, one way or the other, that Parasha Ha'azinu should allow us insight into the level of God's worship, a level which includes both tzaddik and yashar, and we should work at being tzaddikim, as well as being yasharim, as well as being straightforward in our interactions with other people. Even on Yom Kippur, it says, the great day of atonement, Ein Yom HaKippurim, Averot sheben adam lachavero, Ein Yom HaKippurim mechaper ad shiratzet chavero. Interpersonal levels of behavior, it's not an automatic forgive on Yom Kippur, even if you say I'm sorry to God 1,000 times. You have to somehow work with other people, and that's the level of tzaddik v'yashar, as emphasized in Ha'azinu. We hope that each of us, in his or her own way, can reach that level. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that everyone can study Ha'azinu, and Shana Tova U'Metuka.
Thank you, Rabbi.